Hello, everyone. It's Dr. William Mansbach from the BCAT Research Center. I'm back with you to present another episode in our series, Dear BCAT. This is a series where our faculty addresses your questions from the field. Today's question is from Elise, who is a clinical social worker. She writes, in a recent dementia care certification program, the speaker stated that poor sleep seems to cause dementia, especially Alzheimer's disease. Is this correct? As someone who is a poor sleeper, this does worry me. Well, Elise, this is a really good question. There has been more attention, I think, focused on the association between sleep and dementia. Part of this is due to the COVID-19 pandemic, where sleep has really been, unfortunately, greatly sacrificed. Researchers are focusing even more on the sequelae associated problems with poor sleep. But with respect to your question, let's talk about the issues here. So maybe a good way to do so is to share and talk about 5 key points. So the first one, I think, gets to the heart of your question. There is a statistically significant association between sleep and dementia, such that poor sleep, which I'll define in a moment, is associated with dementia, both earlier onset of symptoms and perhaps rate of progression. But there is not convincing evidence that there's a causal link. Does poor sleep cause dementia? Does dementia then cause poor sleep? Is there some intervening or moderating variable between the two? We don't really know. So it would not be appropriate to state that poor sleep causes dementia. It's really about understanding the association between these two things. The pathogenesis of dementia, but particularly Alzheimer's disease or AD, does begin many years before symptoms begin to present themselves. So it is important to look at sleep as a mid-adult pattern of interest, not just something we focus on when one is in his or her 70s, 80s, 90s, and above. So we think about the pathogenesis developing these neuritic plaques and neurofibrillary tangles 10 to 15 years before symptoms appear, certainly using Alzheimer's as a paradigm, although really could be longer than that, I think. So sleep has many functions, but there is one that is particularly important. We think about sleep, particularly slow wave sleep or deep sleep, let's say stage 4 sleep, as a critical time for housekeeping. It's where we flush some of the neurotoxins, beta amyloid being one of them. And as I'm sure you're aware, beta amyloid is sort of the sine qua non or clearly associated with Alzheimer's disease. So it may be the case that if we have chronically poor sleep and we don't have enough slow wave sleep, then our brains don't have a chance to flush beta amyloid and other kinds of toxic proteins. So that is an important thing for us to think about. Sleep patterns in our 50s, 60s, and 70s really are important to take a closer look at. Let's do that in a moment. And of course, we should really define what we mean by poor sleep. So poor sleep can be defined in many different ways, and keep in mind that sleep is really idiosyncratic and in some ways even idiopathic. What I mean by that is for one person, 6.5 hours of sleep is perfectly adequate and maybe is the right amount of sleep for her, for him. For somebody else, maybe it's 8.5. So it's really hard to come up with one specific figure. But generally, we think about sleep goal as, in terms of volume, total sleep as 7 to 8 hours. And of course, there are extenuating circumstances that could impact on that. But most of the research is looking at 7 to 8 hours as the critical window. So chronic undersleep would be basically 6 and less hours. In some cases, 6 to 7 hours if you really need 8 hours. But I think about it mostly as less than 7 hours, even though I have on my slide 6 to 7. Chronic oversleep, interestingly enough, this can become problematic. We have some evidence that would suggest that people who are chronic oversleepers also have a heightened risk for dementia, particularly for Alzheimer's disease. Data is a little less clear. They are a little less clear, but it's nevertheless in the data set. And I think chronicity can be defined as 10 or more years of having a poor pattern. This is give or take. There's really a standard deviation here or variability. For some people, maybe it's 5 years. For other people, maybe it's 15, but 10 seems to be a fairly safe figure to go with. So less 6 hours or less, let's say chronic oversleep, 9 hours or more for a decade. Now, if you look at the studies that have been done, I think one of the better studies was reported by a team in Finland relatively recently. So their key finding was this: chronically sleeping 6 hours or less during your 50s, 60s, or even 70s was associated with a 30% increased risk for dementia, developing onset dementia, as compared to same age peers. So this would be people who are sleeping, let's say 7 hours or 8 hours even. So if you look at if you compare the demographics and control for them, the chronic undersleep confers a 30% heightened risk for developing dementia. Now, there is good news in all this. There are things that we can do. It would not be accurate to say if we control our sleep, we get adequate 78 hours most nights, that we won't have dementia, but we do improve our odds. That's a good thing to know. But what goes into sleep, right? So certainly managing mood's important, depression, anxiety, alcohol use, substance abuse, all these things are subtractive of sleep. From a wellness perspective, the 3 M's are the 3 types of movement: move your body, move your mind, move toward other people. These are not only good for your mood functioning, but they're associated with improved sleep patterns. So, Elise, I think we addressed your question. And if you're interested in a place where you can go to try to improve sleep, you might check out 15 for Me and the Enrich program. It's a BCAT offering. It does many things, but enhancing sleep is one of them. Okay, I'm Dr. Mansbach. Very nice to spend time with you. I look forward to talking to you next month.